Can you hear me? Yes? So, thank you, Mohammed. Copy fitting for fun and profit. I doubt that I need to explain fun and profit to you very much, but I probably need to explain copy fitting to at least some of you. And I'll also cover the use cases for copy fitting, talk about what's in the existing standards or been proposed for standards for XML or HTML to do with copy fitting, look at some of the implementations, and then talk about some of the next steps for the internal project that I'll be talking about. So copy fitting, there's actually two meanings for copy fitting. At the design stage, it is working out how much space your text is going to take. If you're producing an Office document, you format your text, you send it to the printer, your Office printer takes as many pages as it takes. But if you're a commercial printer or a publisher, you probably worked out in advance how many pages you want the book to be. So then the designer has to adjust the fonts and leading and other line length so that it fits or should fit the space that's the extent that's been defined for it. The second definition of copy fitting, which is what you see more today, is copy fitting as massaging the text or the formatting so that the text fits into the available space or fits better into the available space. Sometimes this is for aesthetic reasons, and sometimes we're back to that profit motivation. So I'm going to talk about the 6 steps of copy fitting as designed from How to Spec Type from about 1983. If you go back even earlier, you can get actual books about how to do this. You count the number of manuscript characters. Back in the old days, you'd look at the typewritten text and measure things. You probably just get the result in Word right now. You think of the typeface, the type size, you cast off, which is the term for determining how many characters in your average line. You work out how many lines you're going to have, and from that work out how many pages, and then you add the leading to fill the pages, and that'll give you a page count. If that comes out as too short, then you up the font size, or you adjust the leading, or decrease the line length, and if it's too long, you do the reverse. Fairly straightforward. The second aspect, copy fitting as adjustment, sometimes this is to fix formatting problems. Sometimes, as I said, the publisher has said how many pages he wants, or the company wants the book to be. This is often because it's more efficient to print a book that is a multiple of 8, 16, 32, perhaps even 96 pages than to print something which is 98 pages, which is a number of standard signatures plus 2 extra pages that need to be tipped in as an extra operation. Sometimes you might want to reduce the page count to decrease the cost of producing the book. Sometimes you want to fluff the book up so it looks better on the bookshelf. There's any number of formatting problems that could happen. Most experts on typography would tell you there's a problem if there's too many lines, consecutive lines end with a hyphen, or if there's too many lines that start and end with the same word, or end with the same word or start with the same word, because as you scan, you can get confused about which line you're reading. A widow line is a line at the top of the page, a short line or just a few words at the top of the page. If it's followed by more paragraphs, that's bad, but if it's the only thing on the last page of a chapter of a book, then that looks really bad. You can have too much white space, which interferes with your reading, and there's many, many more. This, for example, is taken from an example that Dave Kramer gave at a W3C workshop on publishing in Japan. This is from, I guess he lifted it from an internal editor's copy. Editors go through and say, this paragraph looks too loose, there's too much white space in the paragraph. That's obviously an aesthetic consideration. Widows and orphans, as I said, the wonderful thing is that people disagree about what's a widow and orphan. That today's definition, well, this is from British books. So these two are widows and that's an orphan. Under other circumstances, they'd all be widows. So the thing about all these aesthetic considerations is that everybody has a different opinion. As many people have been quoted as saying, the nice thing about standards is there's so many of them to choose from. A book production for graphic designers advises don't change the copy fitting to fit a space by altering the tracking, the type or the leading, because that will affect the color of the text, which is, the color is the overall impression of the page. But conversely, CSS features for page media by Bert Boss, his advice is in a newspaper, etc., if the last column is a bit short, then just adjust the leading to make it look better. So it's all, there's no hard and fast rules. Examples of copy fitting for aesthetics. This was from a tech document that was provided to Antenna House Japan, manually fixing the line break so that says Internet Protocol, Internet version 6 protocol on one line instead of having a bad page break. If you picked up a copy of this, the appendix lists all of the Antenna House CSS selectors. If I did that with the ordinary styles, we'd have got 2 pages and 2 rows on the 3rd page. So just for that table, I adjusted the padding in the table cells to bring it all back onto 2 pages so you could look at all the selectors in one go. And as I said, we'll get back to the profit margin. There's the factors of what I call shelf appeal versus cost per page. Sometimes you want to reduce the page count to reduce the publisher's cost, but sometimes a publisher might want to fluff up the book, spread things out, use thicker paper so that it looks better on the bookshop shelf. Because we all know to not judge a book by its cover, but we're real suckers for judging a book by the width of its spine before we buy it. So, for example, the blurb.com service, which we used for those books, requires trade paperbacks to be in 6-page signatures, blocks of 6 pages. If you manage to make a document that naturally formatted as 15 pages, you're left with a choice. You have the choice of tightening things up so it fits in fewer signatures, therefore the cost per book is less for you. Or you have the choice of fluffing, as I said, fluffing it out, to use a very non-technical term, so that it better fills the available space and the reader feels like they're getting more value for their money. And there's that all-important width on the bookshop shelf. Another place where you might apply copy fitting to change things is in page-for-page parallel translations. This is from a multi-function printer that I used to throw out. The English and the Brazilian Portuguese pages have exactly the same content on them. The content for every language occupies exactly the same number of pages, and exactly the same topics are on the same numbered page in each language. One explanation is that once you've got one language, you know exactly how big the book is going to be for the book that bundles all the languages together. But I also heard the rationalization that it lets the help desk people point the user on the phone to a page in the manual, and you translate the instructions for help desk people into another language, and the page number references still work. Another place where a detail from this, I hope you can see the green, but translations of English tend to be larger, or take up more space. So to fit all the Brazilian Portuguese on the same page, they've reduced the font size and they've reduced the space between the lines. Another example from the same printer is its instructions for how to choose between a UK and a European power cord. How many of you would need those instructions? Someone living in Canada has forgotten. So, I mean, there must be some requirement to put this in, but it has 24 languages on it. Printing on one side of paper is comparatively cheap. If this had gone over to the other side of the page, it would increase the cost for the printer manufacturer for no good effect, because no one's going to read this anyway. And you're not going to let the editorial staff modify text in 24 languages to make things fit, so you adjust the formatting so it all fits on one page. I have here a package insert for some medicine. According to WebMD, in 2010, there were 4 billion prescriptions filled in the US alone. So if there were 4 billion prescriptions that needed 2 pages instead of 1, then there's a whole lot of extra cost in there. So, and you're really not going to let your editorial staff adjust the text in a package insert. So again, you've got to try and squeeze things, copy fit so it fits the available space. In terms of standards for these things, there's a few XSL properties that you can view as relating to copy fitting. There's some requirements in XSL-FO 2.0 and Bert Boss's forward-looking list of features required for page media has some more. In XSL, there's properties for controlling hyphenation, hyphenation keep, hyphenation ladder count, and Orphans and Widows, which are for the aesthetics of your formatting. Hyphenation keep, as it says there, is whether or not a page can end on a hyphen. A hyphenation ladder count is the number of successive hyphens. And widows and orphans is this concept of it doesn't look good if there's only one line or very few lines left at the bottom of a page, or if there's just a little bit that gets carried over onto the next page. So there's a control for how many lines to keep and the minimum number of lines required to carry over. This is in common with CSS. XSL-FO 2.0 had some requirements for copy fitting, which sort of fit the aesthetics and potentially the profit side of things. For example, to shrink or grow content by change properties for the text, the line spacing, etc., which you've seen in action. To make it constrained to a certain area by modifying a defined set of properties, and ideally it would be possible to define the precedence and priority of these properties or sets of properties to achieve the copy fitting. CSS features for page media is an informal document solo project put together by Bert Boss, one of the inventors of CSS, about what else is required. And he has a large section on copy fitting, but he describes it as the process of selecting fonts and other parameters so the text fits a given space. And again, it can range from making a book fit a certain number of pages, as we've talked about, or making a word fit a certain box, as we've also talked about. In terms of implementations, the print and page layout community group at the W3C did some extensions for XSLT processes for running the processor inside the XSLT transformation, so you get an area tree, a representation of the formatted document, and make decisions about the formatted areas. This graphic is from a poster done for Belisage, and it actually illustrates 5 or 6 uses of the extension to change the font sizes or change the margins. So the extensions are open source. There's versions for .NET, and Java works with FOP and with Antenna House. And as I said, you can make decisions about the formatted sizes of areas. So far, it's only been used in bespoke applications such as this poster. Antenna House has some extensions related to that you could apply to copy fitting. It extends, for example, the overflow property to say what to do when you have overflow. So in this case, I've recreated that example from tech and used the overflow properties. If there's an overflow, we'll condense the text, and we'll do that by adjusting the font stretch. So it's probably not very perceptible, but the Japanese text has been slightly compressed horizontally to fit in the available space. Oops. FOP has a couple of options, extensions for not just limiting the number of lines that go over, that stay or remain on the page, but limiting the length of the list items and tables. So a table would have to occupy at least this much space before it breaks, or leave that much space on the last page that the table is on. Speed data from Patrick is based on Lua tech, and you can do your conditional logic in Lua, yes? Good nod over there, thank you. Got that right. So how would you go about this? How we say the traditional formatting model for XSL-FO is FO, run it through a formatter, you get formatted output, typically PDF. So just a sample document here with some random text lifted from somewhere. Oops. And with a couple of forced line breaks just to make some widows. If you're looking at this, you think this wasn't very good, because it isn't. The first thing, if you're going to fix it, you need to know what it is you're going to fix. So the next sort of level of processing you would want to do is to be able to report the errors. So I have one iteration of this, a definition of the error conditions, process the area tree to make a report that a person could look at. This, for example, is an early HTML version of the report. It indicates, for example, that as an area with 4 lines in a row, the end with a hyphen, and the last line of the block area was too short. Now, how many of you would recognize that that was actually the last column of the formatted example? Probably none of you. So another level of sophistication is to process the error report and include something in the formatted output, or use the formatted output with extra information added to show you where the areas are, because that's much simpler than trying to look at a report and work out how that corresponds to the formatted page. So here's a different version with the areas with infelicities highlighted. So widows, a line a page that ends on a hyphen, more widows, and a hyphen at the end of a column, and there's our 4 lines that end in. My timer said exactly the same thing. Another thing, if you think back to Dave Kramer's example, I can process and indicate the areas that have white spaces too wide. The level of the red corresponds to how expanded the white space is. But I can also include the formatted pages in a larger report. Something I've tried is to present larger than thumbnails of the actual pages with the errors highlighted, and a sort of visual table of contents where the pages that have errors, their thumbnails have the red border around them to say these are the pages that you need to look at. And so, of course, we're here for automated copy fitting. So, using another iteration, using the extensions from the print and page layout community group, I have my definition of the error conditions and also copy fitting conditions, which produces a copy fitted FO that I can format. So the copy fitting definition as it stands right now is pretty basic. A set of copy fitting instructions is going to use all of them. FO with the role of chapter drop. We change the height of the formatted FO to 25% of the page. Any FO with this font definition and 11-point font size, we'll change the font size and the line height. So we can run that through. Well, if the XML gets generated into XSLT, which through parts that aren't showed here, gets matched on the area tree and the adjustments are made. This sort of has a resemblance to schematron. And the result from that still isn't very wonderful. But of course, with the copy fitting, we can do multiple sets of copy fitting. In addition to the first set, if we still get errors or, I guess error conditions, then we can apply a second set of copy fitting. And in this case, we said, use the first set of copy fitting instructions that results in no detected errors. And for our short and sweet sample, the result is somewhat better. So this is all done with XSLT external to the FO processor. If this was built into the FO processor, then the FO tree and the area tree are already available. Conceivably, it's faster than running external XSLT and spinning up the formatter. The FO processor has access to the actual font matrix that's being used, the width of all the characters. You'd have more choices. But compared to an XSLT definition or an XML, well, an XSLT definition of the code for detecting the error conditions, it would be harder for users to extend. So future work for this would be to add more error conditions, more properties that can be copy fit, and to do more to parse the FO expressions. Right now, you've seen it matching on property values, but properties, almost all properties in XSL-FO can be actual expressions, and there's a parser for FO property expressions written in XSLT that's included in the FO check framework for, it's in Oxygen. I could reuse that to parse the error expressions and to handle more of the functions that operate on something other than inheritance in XSL-FO. So in conclusion, copy fitting is useful in many documents. You can see real-world applications of it. There is some copy fitting in existing formatters, and it's possible to do automated error detection, reporting and correction operating on XSL-FO. So thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Do you have time for 1 or 2 questions? Abel?
There was one slide about extensions in XSLT. Did you mean by that extensions as in like other libraries? Or do you mean extensions written in XSLT that can be used in any other processor? In other words, is it portable? You remember the slide? Or yes, yeah, somewhere around there, yeah?
Yeah, no, they're using the extension mechanism for specific processes, for Saxon on Java and .NET, and Xerxes on Java and .NET that uses their extension mechanisms.
So there are actual extensions that are specific to a processor?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd be happy to talk to you about your extension mechanism.
Exactly, that was why I was asking. Thanks.
Yes, if our hotels were further from the airport, from the conference the other night, I would have got to that. But
I'll know where to find you.
Yep.
Any other question? No? So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.